Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to review films either current or classic. And this week we've got two current films coming at you. That's right, we're doing a double feature here on MBP this week. We're going to be talking The Suicide Squad as well as The Green Knight. Apparently it is the week for movies with the word "the" in the title. Who knew? But here we are. Let me introduce you to my fantastic co-hosts before we jump into those movie conversations. Jim Pugliafico is with us here in the virtual studios. Sweetheart, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, babe. And I'm glad to be here. We have a special guest, which makes it much more fun. I mean, it's fun every week, but like this is extra fun this week. And I can't wait to get into both of these movies with you guys.
All about the extra fun. And hold that note. We're going to introduce that special guest here in just moments. I am overwhelmed by the excitement over this, but we'll get there. Will Lindis is here first, though. William Lindis, how the hell are you, my friend?
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Hey, guest that we're going to be introducing here in just a moment.
Yeah, hey, guest.
And hey, everyone that's listening, tuning in live. Actually, I'm doing great, Brad, to answer your question. Doing really good today. Super excited to talk about both of these movies. There's a lot to dig into on these films. So, boy, howdy. This is going to be a heck of a double feature.
Did you just say boy howdy?
Oh, I did say boy howdy.
He did. He's from Texas, so it must be, right?
I'm
boy howdy.
I'm tickled pink.
See, I always thought that was a reference to Cream Magazine. I didn't know that was regional. Okay.
I just know that it had the word boy in it, and that makes me happy.
I'm just saying there's enough music behind me to, make that
wait. There's music behind it?
Oh. What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Two.
Well, you've heard from this very handsome gentleman already, but let us officially introduce Bill Zanowitz of the Comic Book Bears podcast, who helped us celebrate 400 episodes just 10 episodes ago. Bill, so great to have you back on the show. How have you been?
Been very good. Been enjoying the summer, in its compromised form, I guess we can say. But, still trying to go outdoors and do activities and, filling the time up. Hello, Brad. Hello, Will. Hello, Jim. Hello, everybody watching and listening. And it's always a thrill to be on with you guys. Very happy to be talking about the film we're going to be talking about and some other stuff. So,
well, I tell you what, when it comes to comic book films, the Comic Book Bears podcast is always our first stop when it comes to guests. It's great to have you on. And real quick, I just got a note from Jim wanting to make sure I'm using the right sound source. The joys of doing it live. Did that come through, Jim?
That's much better now. Yeah, maybe you were just further away, but
I don't know.
I'll edit all this out. Don't worry about it.
You'll work your magic of magicalness +5, and I'm sure it will be fine. But Bill, yes, welcome once again. We're so jazzed to have you with us. And speaking of special guests, we have some folks with us in the live chat as well. A whole bunch of folks are on. We got howdy from Hamstract. Hey, welcome. Good
howdy
to see
without
you.
The boy.
I mean,
yeah, just a regular howdy.
A regular old rootin' tootin' howdy.
There you go. We got Bruce Rustemeyer, who also says howdy howdy. He's a howdy times 2. Hey,
double
Bruce.
howdy. Howdy squared.
Our very own Magic Mike Lovins is here. He says he's
Mike.
He says he's sitting in the tub watching my favorite movie and comic book Bears. Mike, I want to be watching you in the tub. If you want to send screenshots or pictures to us, privately, that's perfectly fine. I'm goading him on because usually he does. Oh my gosh, we got a whole bunch of people. Robert Miller is here. Hey, Robert, good to see you. Tony is here. Hello, handsome guys.
Tony.
Hey, Tony.
Hey.
Howdy. And Xander is putting the nail in the coffin of howdy. He says, bear howdy?
Bear.
Question mark?
Bear howdy.
I like it.
Bear Howdy works for me. That is the official howdy of the Movie Bears podcast. It just happened. Xander, thank you for that awesomeness. Oh, goodness. All right. Well, listen, we got a whole lot to talk about. We got 2 full movies to discuss on this week's episode. Jim, Will, Bill, how are we feeling? Ready to jump in? Question mark.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exclamation point. ...
Sure.
Let's do it. What's the worst that could happen on this mission?
All right. Well, for those who may be new to the show or it's been a hot minute since you've listened, just a reminder on our format, we're going to talk about the Suicide Squad. Very important that the spoiler free for probably 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll give you a fair warning before we open things up to spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, you're kind of on the fence. You want to hear the take from one of your favorite comic book bears who is here with us. We're going to give that to you spoiler free before we make that jump. So don't worry. We'll awkwardly ramble with enough time for you to step away as needed when it is time for spoilers. All of that spoiler plate warning out of the way. Here we go. Our discussion of The Suicide Squad. All right, Jim, if you don't mind, spoiler free, of course, because we just promised and we don't want to go back on our word. If you would give us the basic setup of this film and tell us about your experience seeing the film. Where did you see it? What did you think? Is it worth checking out? Go for it.
Yeah, I'm ready to get into it. Supervillains assemble! Is that what it is in this one? I don't know. I forget. Did they say that? I don't think so. Anyway, the government, again, after only 5 years, sends a weird collection of villains, including Harley Quinn, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, King Shark. I think it's King Shark. Is it King Shark? I don't know.
It is King Shark.
Maybe he had a name. And a bunch of others to this enemy-infused island nation of Corto Maltese to take down a really big bad. This non-remake, maybe sequel to DC's 2016 Suicide Squad. It's kind of different because they added the in the title, and this one has the previous one did not. So then that they're growing the universe by adding the. This one's directed by James Gunn, who we know from several properties. I love his Guardians properties very much. This one stars Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. You've got Idris Elba, John Cena, Joel Kinnaman, Viola Davis is back. So we hear Sylvester Stallone, Jai Courtney, Peter Capaldi, and many, many, many more. I'm not going to run through them all. So here's the thing. I barely remember anything about the 2016 Suicide Squad film other than I remember a bunch of people get killed in the film. That's not a spoiler. I just said a bunch of people get killed in the film. I mean, a bunch of people get killed in this film too. That's not a big spoiler. And I didn't really like the 2016 one. I do remember that. But I'm going to come down on the recommend side, not a raving recommend for this film, because while there's some things I sort of hated in this film, there are enough things I appreciated and even enjoyed that I'm pretty sure, will probably stick with me. In the end, it was a mixed bag, and we'll go through a lot of those things. Some I really liked are hard to talk about without spoilers. I'll say in general that this film, it tried and fairly succeeded to do some very different cinematic things than most other comic book based films just don't. And I really, really like that about this. So this one stood out for me in that way. There are some things that I actually said, wow, they're doing that. That's pretty awesome. And I'm like, whoa, that's incredible. I hadn't really seen that in a comic book movie. Why? I don't know. Also, I think it's trying to break the mold while it's walking that line of trying to break that mold while also staying true to comic sensibilities for the most part, right? Meanwhile, I have a cat on my desk that just brought a toy up here and wants to play. Thanks, Jordy. You've really helped me out here. I'll just say that there were other things I didn't like about this film. We'll talk about the R rating and the benefits and drawbacks of that, because I don't think there are many comic book films other than like Deadpool, maybe the first Suicide Squad movie.
No,
that
was a PG-13.
was PG-13.
PG-13, yeah.
It felt a little R in some
I
cases.
think was Harley Quinn and the Emancipate, whatever the hell they ended up calling
Yeah,
it.
that might have been.
Was that an R?
I don't know. There are very few
Yeah.
R-rated movies, I think, in the MCU and in DCU. But
like Logan.
yeah. I'm just becoming less and less a fan of like gratuitous violence, especially gun violence. And this one has a lot of it, and some of it left a sour taste in my mouth for me. And I struggle a little bit internally with wanting less of what it seems most other moviegoers want in these movies. A lot of people really get off on this and enjoy seeing that on the screen. It must be me getting older that I just like more and more. I'm just like, oh, I really didn't need to.
Yeah.
I didn't really enjoy seeing that. But anyway, I'll end it here and just say it's an overall positive for me. And I come down on the recommend side for it.
All right. Well, FYI, the Harley Quinn movie was rated R, by the way.
Okay,
I just
great.
double
Thank
checked. So it was an R rating. Jim, before we let you off the hook, thank you for your thoughts and impressions. Of course, I know the answer because we watched this together, but tell our listeners, where did you watch this? At home, theaters? Yeah. What was your experience?
We went to the theater to watch it. I mean, who knows how many more times we'll get to go to the theater, the way things are going right now, unfortunately. But we're masked up to go in, only had the masks off to eat, and there weren't many people like directly there weren't anybody next to us. There were other people in the auditorium. It was great. I mean, the movie sounded great. It looked great. So that was fantastic. Other than that, yeah, I'm always glad for a movie theater experience, especially on something like this.
Especially when you can get that awesome popcorn that always.
I don't even remember if we had popcorn for this.
No.
Popcorn,
snacks, whatever the fuck concessions are a thing.
Guys, if I just like just disappear from sight and sound, it's because the cat has like probably disconnected or chewed through something. So
we have a 2-month-old kitten, Bill, that is just a holy terror right now. We love him. We love him to death.
Or if Jim disappears, it's because he strayed too far from the mission and Brad pushed the red button.
Yeah,
that got dark. I don't think
flip the toggle switch and press the button, right?
Except in this case, there's not a bomb in his head. There's a nap trigger. It just puts him to sleep for a little while.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. That's the PG-13 version of this.
I use it when he's watching something on TV that I don't want to watch, and then I can get away with changing the channel while he's asleep. So
I'm dying to hear what you guys thought of this movie. Brad, I kind of know where you felt.
Will
and Bill.
I'll go last. I'm really anxious to hear from Bill and Will. But let's go to Bill first as our special guest, Bill Z. First of all, did you see this at home or theaters? And what did you think? Spoiler free, of course.
I ended up seeing it at the theater. But it was like you guys, masked up, very strategic, 3:00 matinee. You're gonna be definitely undersold. Not anybody close to me. I hate that we have to go through these moves to ensure cinema safe experiences. But this was one film that I did want to see in the theaters because I still have this like little notch of like this little dig inside me, like, you never saw Wonder Woman 84 in the theater, and that's, if you know me and my love of DC Comics, period. It's a check that needs to be, I need to check that box off at some point. But I did go see it in the theater. And I'm glad I did. And like you said, who knows if things go a different direction, and that turns out to be, that turns out to be another sizable gap between those experiences. Hope not, but
Fingers crossed.
yeah.
Yeah. And what did you think, Bill, especially with your expertise, your background in comic books? Did this hit all the right buttons for you?
Well, I have to say, I do take off my comic book hat a lot when I see these films, because there's so many changes in characterization, and I mean, there's never been a film that like literally lifts off the page. The closest one I think is Watchmen, and at the same token, I think it's actually it's actually to the detriment of the film that it aligns so closely with the original source material. That's, you're doing something else with these characters. It's a different medium, and just run and either have fun with it or do something inventive with it, but do something with it. And I think this film definitely did. I was on your show in 2009, 16, 19. How long ago was Suicide Squad, the first one?
2016.
Yeah.
Yeah. Believe it or not. Right. Believe it or not.
And to date, that's the one DCEU film I don't come down on the positive side of. There was a lot of, I felt, blown opportunities with that film. This one, I thought they got it so right almost every moment of the cinematic experience. The absolutely correct director for material like this, a really engaging cast. Idris Elba is a fantastic lead. John Cena, my God, what a great comedic straight man, and just uses him perfectly. All the other actors are used really well. Jim, I know what you're talking about with the hyper gore element to the film, and with this kind of film, I just thought that's the way you have to go with this, because with the concept of nobody being safe, you may as well take that to the extreme. And boy, this one did. And we'll get into that with spoilers, but just from the structure of the film, I hate to say adversary, but the antagonists that they were facing, it just felt like everything was in line. And just this film was everything the first film wasn't, and that was fun. There wasn't a moment where I wasn't having fun watching this film. And I also especially love, because when you do have the confines of a cinematic universe, that we can have a film like Shazam and a film like this, which are both leaning towards the comedic sides, but operate on such different tracks. I love that we have the opportunity to enjoy that type of variety. But for this one, definitely a rave for me.
All right. Awesome. Well, glad to hear that you enjoyed it so much. You mentioned, it being a comic book movie, having fun with it. That's the hope. Comic books are supposed to be, fun, even when they're dark and gritty and dreary. You still enjoy them to some degree. So that's awesome. Glad to hear that. Will, I saw a comment from you on a Facebook thread, so I know a little bit about how you feel. I think just in general, but I want to know specifics. Did you like this film? Is it a recommend? And what tripped your trigger here?
Yeah, so I saw this one in theaters. Went down to the glorious Alamo Drafthouse, South Lamar. It was not quite as empty as y'all's experiences, but they have sort of like every other seat, or sort of like little pods of like two, sort of like blocked off, so you weren't sitting within like two seats of anybody in any given direction. So we had a nice little outing of it. This was one that, we could have stayed at home and watched on the television, but we wanted to see on the big screen, mainly because I needed this to be a redemption story. Like you, Bill, the 2016 movie was just not for me. It's so easy to kind of fall into hyperbole, but it really is the least good cinematic experience I've had probably in the last 5 years. I really did not like that movie from an editing perspective, from a storytelling perspective. It just failed across the board.
The makeup worked. The makeup worked.
And Bill, the Academy agrees with you. It did give us Margot Robbie sort of like launching sort of what she's done. But I give as much of that. I could give less of that to the film and more of that to Margot Robbie, who has just had absolute tenacity, not just with the character, but also kind of in the producing and advocacy role for that character and for that world outside of it. But this movie had a lot of heavy lifting to do to like wash that taste out of my mouth. And it did. I had a very similar experience to you, Bill. Just grin on my face all the way through. I was super excited to see what they did here. This is a situation where it's not even a matter of like what they do in the comics, because a lot of the characters were sort of obscure characters or characters who didn't have like much to them. And James Gunn decided to pluck those characters and do something with them. So you have the trappings and the molds of these characters, but kind of the core of what makes them is created by Gunn whole cloth. And I appreciate that. I love the idea of being able to build these incredible stories on the foundations of the books. I love the action sequences in here. They were very well paced out. They were super fun. They were creatively edited. I always had a sense of who was doing what at any given time. The narrative flowed. There were a couple of spots that made me laugh out loud. There are a couple of spots that surprised me. And most importantly, there were a couple of spots where I was really surprised at how much I became just endeared to these characters.
Yes.
There are a few characters who like, and James Gunn did this with Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think that he did it as well here. He's really good at building these found families storylines where people who are oddballs or outcasts or who are just like in some way disparate come together and become something better. Guardians of the Galaxy did it. We saw it here. And I think just as a gay man, I appreciate that a lot, because a lot of the like, I have my blood family, but I also have my weird family of outcasts and, just misfits that I've accumulated over the world who have joined my Guardians of the Galaxy, my Suicide Squad. So I appreciated being able to see myself there. I appreciated being able to see some of these characters. There's one character in particular who is now one of my favorite on-screen comic book characters that I've seen. And it was not who I was expecting it to be going into this. It was someone who I was really excited to see get the emotional arc that they got here. And I think that's incredible. We'll talk about that in spoilers. I feel bad, like I can't talk really about any character, because even saying this character I liked or this actor did a good job feels like it sort of like gives away who makes it further, who doesn't. So I'm being super cagey about that, but I think that's sort of the deal with this type of movie. But yeah, this is a high recommend for me. Is it like the best comic book movie ever? I don't know if it is. I think that there's a couple of spots where maybe it didn't connect maybe as well as it could have if I really like nitpick, but whatever. I had fun. This was super fun. This did everything that it needed to do, and it washed a lot of stink off of the franchise. Yeah, sign me up for another 5 of these, which is something I never thought I would say after 2016.
That's amazing to hear, Will. I'm thinking back to our discussion so many years ago, which is so weird to think about, because I feel like that movie just came out like a year or two ago. But yeah, that was 2016. So to hear you with such a turnaround, it's a big surprise. You mentioned you're being cagey. Are you being Luke cagey?
See what you did. See what you did there.
I know that's Marvel, but it's a comic pun.
You know what? It counts. It counts. We're gonna count it here.
Y'all are just trying to confuse me.
Don't worry, Jim. We won't be like, did you see the Spider-Man cameo in this?
Yeah, no, definitely don't want to do that. All right. Well,
we're gonna hear what you think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna give a big, long, drawn out, explanation of my feelings, my thinkings. But I think you guys have pretty much said most of the things that I would say. I liked it. I don't know that I loved it. I thought some of the character interactions were great. I do want to say that the CW Flash show made me a fan of the King Shark character. So I was a little worried going into this movie that I was going to be like, not my King Shark. But I actually ended up really fucking loving King Shark in this movie. So that was awesome. I had no idea that he was voiced by Sylvester Stallone going into the film. But when he started talking, I'm like, is that? And Jim's like, is that Sylvester Stallone? And I'm like, oh my God, it totally is. So that was super fun to see. Really, really great. Definitely, it's a fun movie. I was a little surprised by the level of gore in this movie. It was kind of interesting to, I don't know, have a DC movie at this point. I know, the Harley Quinn movie was a R-rated film as well, but I feel like this kind of even ups the level of gore that we got from that movie. So it's interesting that, I don't know, we get all this violence, and I'm thinking, were the Guardians of the Galaxy movies R-rated?
No.
I don't think they were, right?
No.
So this is like a level up even of a lot of that violence, and I kind of dug it, but it also kind of pulled me out of the movie a little bit. I don't know. Like with comics, I am not the comic expert, but like, you get blood in comics, you get gore in comics, but I always feel like there's a certain line, at least in some of the titles I read, and full disclosure, I read like Superman and Supergirl. I don't really read a lot of the dark ones. So I guess I'm just not used to seeing that much blood in a comic related title, unless it's like Deadpool or something. I think it worked overall here, but I probably could have done a little bit less with it. So just catching up with the chat, we've got a couple comments. Steve Maury, Maury, sorry. That guy. He says it also definitely earned the R in a few ways, gore being one of them. And I think that's important to call out. It's not just gore that got at the R. There's language there too.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, is there language? But that's part of it. Xander says it's like they were trying for a Deadpool feel. And I know we're going to go into spoilers here in just a few moments, but that's an interesting comparison that I've kind of heard thrown around a little bit online over the last couple days. Do you feel like this movie was trying to be like Deadpool levels of gore and language? Was it trying to up it? Was it even consideration?
No. If there's a comparison, for me, it's nothing that's cinematic. If any of you have ever been familiar with the plays of Martin McDonagh, there's hyper gore in some of them. And you're watching it, and there's points where you're laughing, and you're like, I shouldn't be laughing, And to me, that it tapped into a vibe like that far more than Deadpool. I understand where he's coming from because they are both comic book movies and they both have this particular element. But I did think that it was maybe on the same highway, but in different vehicles. I think it treated the humor of that slightly different, and I can understand that, but I do think that there are other influences that probably predominated instead of trying to ape something that worked for two films.
Absolutely. I mean, James Gunn is a guy who he got his start working for Troma. He then moved into doing horror comedies. Like, this is where he cut his teeth, is balancing like hyper gore with making it work both to build tension and also to relieve tension at the same time. He's like a scale balancing both of those. And so seeing him dip back into this, he also was one of the writers for Super, which was another superhero movie, the one with Rainn Wilson, with a lot of hyper violence in it as well. And I think what he really captures there and here as well is that the world of superheroes, we always talk about how it's like, you hear the criticism like there's no stakes, no one gets hurt. Well, this one is like, well, let's see the, kind of like Invincible invisible and things like that. Well, like what happens if we were to play in that hyper realistic space? What would happen? So I really liked seeing James Gunn balance these things. I think a lot of filmmakers would have leaned too far into the comedy or leaned too far into the violence, but he toes a line right between the two.
Yeah, I don't know if I can agree that he hits the line, at least for me, and maybe he does for a lot of fans. But like, unlike Super, which you brought up, Will, like the violence, the ultra violence, and some of the gore that happens in Super is very focused, and in certain instances that have real impact. Like, you know, they have a like, oh my God, that just happened kind of thing. Whereas this one, I just think it's over and over and over again, where you get so desensitized to it. It's just not a thing anymore. And we'll talk about some specifics. I mean, and it does it pretty much right off the bat. We'll talk about more of that in spoilers. But to offset that for me, like I said, there was like a movie within a movie in this film toward the end. I'll just say the climactic stuff at the end was like a different movie within a comic book movie, which I really appreciated for reasons that you might be able to see behind me here, which I thought was super cool. And I was really, I think that kind of what put me over the top in terms of really loving this movie.
Well, it's pretty clear that this is a recommend from just about all of us. Well, not just about. All of us. But it is getting increasingly more difficult to talk about without giving spoilers. So, Jim, Will, Bill, how do we feel about getting into spoiler territory? Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is where the fun starts.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and spoil the crap out of the Suicide Squad. So if you haven't seen it yet, you value your virginal innocence, this is your time to step away. If you want to come back in about 15 minutes for our discussion of The Green Knight, set a timer on your phone. Rejoin us. Otherwise, if you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, however you access your podcasts, use the time index in the handy-dandy show notes, which should be up and available for you by the time you're listening to this episode, and skip ahead as needed. Awkward rambling complete. Spoilers are officially fair game. Where do you folks want to start?
I think we can now finally start talking about some of the characters that actually are significant to the storylines, right? Because, you know, once the beginning of this movie happens and half of the people that are on the posters are killed off, we're sort of left with like a core set of people. And I think that core set of people are the ones that we get the strongest character development out of. Most notably for me, Daniela Melchior plays Ratcatcher 2. And she was the beating heart, I think, in a lot of ways of this movie. She's a misfit. She's a character who controls rats, and she almost like values these relationships with the rats almost as much as she does with people. But we learn about how she learned that from her father and how she applies that to the friendships that she builds. She's the one that builds rapport with King Shark to teach him what, you know, you can have both friends and food. She's the one that builds the rapport up with Bloodsport to sort of help him on his leadership arc through this. She was the core of this movie, and I loved every scene that she was in. And it was nice to walk out of this movie and go like, holy crap. I think Ratcatcher 2, if you look at both Marvel and DC, and you look at all of like the kind of the top, like the female characters who have had high billing in different either ensemble movies or in their own solo books, she's probably one of like the top 10 like female superheroes in movies right now altogether. Ratcatcher 2, and that's pretty damn impressive. I wondering what this means like for the future, but I really loved seeing her.
Yeah, I liked her character a lot. She got to have a big part in the resolution in the final scene. So that was pretty amazing. And that's what I was referring to a little bit earlier, is that there's a freaking kaiju movie in like at the end, and a pretty good one too. I'm like, holy shit. We have to have James Gunn do like a legit kaiju movie. That would be pretty amazing. But because that 15 or 20 minute segment toward the end, I thought was pretty fantastic. Pretty great use of a villain. Kind of the villain climax of the movie. And they even gave the villain a little bit of pathos in this movie,
Absolutely.
Right? And I thought that was great.
Fantastic line they had there.
Yeah, really.
I was content to be floating, looking at the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It crushed me.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I did love that aspect of the movie, and they really didn't show much of the. I guess you could. I don't know if you could call it the villain, right? Was that really a villain? He was really a tool of the villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I do think that ties into how economic the film was. Like with Bloodsport, we never get the backstory. Why this guy has an English accent but a French Cajun last name. It's just you just accept it, and I think that was a lot of that worked into the film. The explanation for why she's Ratcatcher 2 and not Ratcatcher, very quick. They just got the ball rolling and just kept the momentum, and anything that I think would have slowed down by over explaining something, I think just went by the wayside. And I think that was the right move to make. But I do think with that, there was a lot of that tied into Starro as well.
Mm-hmm.
You just had to accept, that this is where they're at right now, and this is what has to be done.
I had a question for you guys. How much did you know about Starro and his role in this movie before you actually sat down and watched the movie?
I saw him in the trailer.
Yeah.
I knew it was a star-shaped.
I didn't know anything.
That's all I knew.
I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And to me, the movie played really well on me for that aspect, because I didn't know what this thing was until the movie explained it to me, and I thought it did it very well. I feel bad for you who knew everything about it going in, because you missed a little bit of what I had, I think.
But at the same token, this isn't the Starro that I know.
Yeah.
And beyond that, there's something wonderfully meta that in the first appearance of the Justice League of America, their adversary was Starro the Conqueror.
Yep.
And, for him to make his debut with, what effectively is a mirror universe version of the Justice League, I just loved it. I just love that meta element that, that they did kind of tip the hat that, that this is a worthy adversary, but look who you're going to face. So,
yeah.
Well, and it also, in a weird way, if that's the first villain that the Justice League fights in the comics, in a weird way, it sort of legitimizes this specific in-game team as well. Not to say that they are the new Justice League or anything like that, but you can draw as a comic fan, that's one of the things that I got out of it was holy crap, they're just like the Justice League in that they're fighting this one guy. And it made me feel even more attached to them as a unit, not just as a bunch of disparate people who had to fight together. It helped pull them together as a group, both in universe and sort of metatextually.
So here's my question. Do these Suicide Squad movies take place in the Snyderverse universe? I think the first one set up the Harley Quinn, Jared Leto, Ben Affleck thing, right? Yes. So could we ostensibly at some point see the Justice League and the Suicide Squad team up?
Yeah, I mean, it's until they issue a press release to the contrary, it is the same world as the theatrical films that we've had. Yeah.
This is effectively the 10th DCEU film.
Okay,
so
they are
part of that big universe. Yeah, it's not and it's what they're sort of doing with it. So the other Suicide Squad is also in the DCU. They're just sort of doing since that one was less well received, it's sort of yes, it happened, but we're just going to cherry pick the couple things that were really important for it. Don't pay too much attention to that. This is the story we're telling. So it's not erasing it. It's really just saying, pull your attention here.
Yeah, and I really liked in the press how they characterized it. Is it a sequel? No, it's a companion. And that's all you need to know, that that there is some connective tissue. And if you want to explore that connective tissue, good on you, but it's still going to be an insular experience.
So how do we feel about DC kind of walking back that first movie then? I mean, obviously for me, this one was light years better. Like, I wish this is what we had from the get-go. But
well, I don't think there's anything that necessarily needs to be contradicted, or there's nothing inconsistent. And I think when you're talking about the first team, this is something I think we should say. It's just a better team. It's just a better dynamic of people working together than we ever had in any moment of the first one. That was one of my biggest criticisms of the film. Like you never had bonding moments in the first film. And with this, it's kind of strange to talk about that, because I did think this played up the notion of nobody being safe to a ridiculous degree. Within the first few minutes, they're laying the template. But I will say, if anything happened to Sebastian the Rat, I was out of there.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that would have been my eject button moment.
He had to live. Hey guys, this movie did something very interesting in the first 30 minutes or so, in that it seemed to kind of it was very self-aware of the first movie, and almost one of the big drawbacks or criticisms of the first movie, in that they killed off all these characters, and it all kind of added up to nothing. And this movie does the exact same thing with the first team, right? It's like they send this first team out, and you're kind of getting jazzed up, right, for this first team, and then all of a sudden they start killing these characters off that you've just came to know, left and right, and then all of a sudden the focus shifts to this other team, right, who become the main characters of the film. That was kind of a weird misdirect, at least for me. And again, this is maybe where my lack of knowledge of some of this stuff really comes into play, and my lack of remembering it much about the first movie. It kind of worked for me. It was weird. I'm like, holy fuck, I just kind of came to know these handful of characters, and they just totally threw them away, and now we're focused on other characters. That's weird. It felt weird, but in the end, I'm like, after a while, it just felt smarter than it did in the moment, I guess.
And Jim, even coming from a comic background, you don't lose anything from that, because these characters, both on the sacrificial team and on the main team, maybe except for Harley Quinn and King Shark, both of them are having moments right now between the different media they've been in. You mentioned Flash for King Shark. Also, the Harley Quinn series featured King Shark and Harley Quinn on a team together, and they're both amazing there too. Aside from them, a lot of these characters, but I mean, Bloodsport and Ratcatcher 2 and Polka Dot Man, they're not A-listers or B-listers or C-listers. He literally got Polka Dot Man came from James Gunn Googling something like dumbest superheroes and saying okay, I want to figure out how I can make one of these guys cool. And then, Total Dismemberment Kid comes from Arm Fall Off Lad, there's, so both teams, it really going into it, and they were smart too, because they put some heavy hitter names, Nathan Fillion, Michael Rooker, Pete Davidson, Flula Borg. None of those are no names. And all of them were on the one team that just sort of bit it. Yeah. And they also were smart and put Captain Boomerang over there too. And a lot of people are thinking oh, they're not going to kill him off.
No. I thought, it's not inconceivable that one of the big names from one of the carryovers from the first one would be taken off the table. But, oh, he's in a coma. I was genuinely shocked when that happened.
Yeah.
I was genuinely shocked. But then at the same token, it's okay, this is the kind of movie it's going to be. Okay.
Yes. Here
we go. Yeah.
So did you guys have any idea that when they were setting up that first team that wasn't going to be that team was a kind of a throwaway or a diversion team or whatever?
Well, I didn't know as we were going, like, where the other characters going to come in that I've
Where they're
seen
gonna
on the
come in?
posters. Are they going to meet up? And I also really like that device within the first half of the film of the going back and forth in time. I really like that storytelling device because it just gave me the proper focus about the linear story going forward and the details that you had to fill in a really, really clever manner, I thought. Yeah.
I just I did want to come back and circle around to the violence thing again. There's a scene about a third of the way through the movie when the team infiltrates a camp, and they think it's an enemy camp, and they're trying to rescue one of the characters, right? And they end up killing a couple of the characters are kind of having this like kill off where they're like, okay, I want to kill this guy by sneezing, in a gun, and they shoot him in the head and his head explodes. And
it's
then
like Legolas versus Gimli in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe, but I mean, I don't know, that scene just didn't ring the bell for me in the way I think maybe the filmmakers wanted, and maybe somebody else appreciated it. I'm like, they're going in wasting all these people, and then to double down on that feeling, in the end we find out, they just killed a bunch of resistance fighters that are kind of on our side. Ha ha ha! Let's laugh that off. And that's a joke.
What I thought would have been great is if
really would have thought
like if that had happened, and then they had said, "Oh, but look what the Cordo Maltese soldiers just did to your camp," Like there could have been. I agree with you, Jim. There could have been since that was effectively played for laughs, there could have been a better button on that.
Yeah, the punch. It needed to land the punchline.
Yeah, and it didn't quite do that. Yeah, and I think there were ways to do it. Yeah.
That's why I mentioned that the violence kind of took me out a little bit. This was a big part where that happens. I don't know. With so much gun violence in this country right now, like this just struck a really weird note for me. Like, innocent people getting killed. It's one thing when like the bad guys are getting gunned down, but for this to be innocent folks, I don't know. It just made me really uncomfortable. The only upside was that we got some dick. So I was okay,
Speaking of coming together as a unit, what do we think of John Cena's unit in his tighty whities?
Well, I meant the actual dick that we got to see in that village scene.
Oh, that scene
before the guy got off.
That was really that was surprising. I'm like, maybe they're gonna show more. You know what I mean? You get a little bit and you want more. It's
okay. So now I'm getting Jim's lukewarm response. He was built up for a lot of it. Okay. I will say there was something really stylistically nice about this entire movie. We have the Harley Quinn fighting in the hallway scene as flowers and birdies are flying around from her, and then the birds start hiding from her once they see her just absolutely wrecking people. That was fun. And the title cards, which might come up again here in a moment in a later review, but I liked the chapter divides where it sort of set each little section of the movie up with a little title card built diegetically into the scene itself. It wasn't popped up on screen. It was something would be burning in the background, or something would be in foam, in suds on a toilet seat, whatever it was. It was always really interesting. And that's one of the things that, I sometimes feel that I want to see more out of comic book movies. That'd be my one thing, really playing up the visual elements of film. This film did that for me.
That's great. Well, Will, speaking of the other film, we do have quite a bit more to talk about on this episode, so we'll probably spin this down here. Before we close off conversation on The Suicide Squad, though, any other final thoughts y'all want to offer?
I was legit gutted with Rick Flagg. I was legit gutted because, and this one element was a carryover in that he basically is the only continuing thread in the comics. In most of the iterations, he's the one that always makes it, and to see him go in that manner, I thought was that was a bit of a gut punch, but perfectly consistent with the rest of the film. And I absolutely love the setup with what is going to be a Peacemaker series. And I loved her team, and I loved what they did. Talking about Amanda Waller and taking her off the storyline for a bit of time. And didn't see that coming either, I gotta say. There was some setup for what might happen afterwards I really enjoyed.
I didn't know there was another series spinning off of this.
Yeah, there's a Peacemaker series. James Gunn's attached. John Cena is going to be doing it, and it's going to be following him. And then those people that were like the people that work for Waller who showed up at the end, Steva G, and I forget the blonde actress's name, who shows up at the end, and they're like, "Well, I guess we have to look after this guy now." That was sort of like the setup for the series on HBO Max.
Did the rat guy Weasel have anything to do with that? Because he got a very weird kind of mid-credit stinger.
We don't know.
We don't know.
That was seemed really random. I'm like, okay, they took this character that really didn't have anything to do but get killed at the beginning, and all of a sudden he gets up and walks off. So I don't know. I don't know what that's all about.
Maybe he's weaseling his way into the Peacemaker series.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Oh, I think the punchline there of the first character to die is actually still alive at the end. I think that's a fun punchline. It's just like, of all the different characters on the beach, for it to be literally the one that died first, like, okay, that's funny.
Yeah. All right. Jim, I don't know. Did you have any final thoughts?
I didn't really. I mean, I think I got everything. I mean, there was some really gorgeous stuff happening here, especially I thought the Harley Quinn sequence where she gets to actually help take down the Starro, right? Does she kind of go inside?
Oh, with the javelin
and like all of that stuff that was done, I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, like visually cool, and like I'm like, wow, this is pretty awesome. I liked all that stuff. Although there's another scene with her early on that has to do with like a little romantic thing with another side character that I didn't really get as to why they did that, but I may have totally missed the meaning of that scene. And they spent like 10 or 15 minutes on them. Or maybe it just seemed like 15 minutes, but it was like her seemed to be falling for another character, and then all of a sudden she ends up killing him, right?
Yeah, but we got a hairy chest shot, so
I don't know what that. Yeah, I don't know what that was meant to be. They just needed to give Harley Quinn more screen time than some of the other characters. I don't know.
I just came away with that, fitting into the general theme of misdirection. Because you're there thinking this guy's going to be, effectively the big bad, and then he's taken off off course.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Final thoughts from me real quick. Actually, let me put up a comment from Tony. Tony says, I was sad that Polka Dot Man got squished. Loved his mom visuals. Polka Dot Man was one of the big highlights of this movie for me. Weird ass character. But the fact that his mom kept coming back as he's visualizing her as the villains, including the kaiju at the end, just tickled me to no end. I'm hoping that Rick Flagg and Polka Dot Man, Bill, because it's the comics, nobody's ever dead, forever. Maybe they got out together. Somehow, and
they were cloned before the mission.
There we go. Yeah, something like that would be awesome.
I think it was James Gunn saying that he's a little bit tired of daddy issues in movies, so he had to put mommy issues in.
You know what? It was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Totally. So, yeah, but yeah, definitely a crazy, weird movie. I know we've all had a chance to kind of get a lot of our thoughts out. There's probably a lot more that we could talk about, but we do have a whole nother movie to discuss. So Bill, because I know you haven't seen The Green Knight, we're gonna real quick before we dive into that. We'll take a quick break between this movie and the next. Do us a favor if you don't mind, because you guys on the Comic Book Bears podcast have an amazing show. You put out such great content. We want to make sure our listeners can find you, find the show. How can they do that?
Sure thing. Well, we are on Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. Probably the best contact point, though, is Comic Book Bears Podcast on Facebook. We do live streams about 3 times a month. We were pretty good with being a weekly show at the start of the pandemic, and then real life set in. And so we're back down to about 3 times a month. But you can find us. That's probably the best contact point. And we're going into our 10th year in April.
Whoa.
So, that amazes me.
Wow,
Absolutely
that's
amazing.
incredible.
Yep. And, just like you have your tags, we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comics. But you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in.
That's very true.
You could be a dolphin or a manatee.
Yeah.
Whatever.
A wolf, whatever you ascribe to.
Yeah.
You can be a king shark or a Harley Quinn.
Yeah. Or a Sebastian.
Or a
Yeah,
Sebastian.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. Well, awesome. Well, Bill, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show with us this week. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your goodness with us. Definitely looking forward to hearing more from you guys.
Okay, before I sign off, can I just say a couple of things? Again, thank you again for having me on. I especially love coming on your show to talk about non-comic book movies. So hopefully we can do that again. There's some coming up in the future that might work in. I just wanted to do this pitch for Jim specifically, since you really love the kaiju elements. If you want to track down the original Suicide Squad stories, you'll see there's a dinosaur here, giant dinosaurs, and those basically were their first adversaries for the first iteration of the Suicide Squad, known as Task Force X.
I will check that out.
Force X. So you have that. I also just wanted to say hi to my friend Vince Tenebra, who tuned in and had a basically on point comment about Polka Dot Man there. And I also wanted to say I'm going to bail now, but it's not because I don't have a lack of interest in the next film you're talking about. I so dig Arthurian Legend. As a teenager, I wore out my VHS copy of Excalibur. I've acted in productions of Camelot. I'm so well versed in Arthurian Legend, know Gawain inside out. And it's killing me that I had to make a choice between Suicide Squad and this next film you're going to talk about. But I will eventually see it if I feel cinema safe, and if not, it'll be that.
Yeah.
But it's not for lack of interest for me saying goodbye. I actually want to keep myself spoiler free a bit.
Well, totally get that, Bill, and would love to hear what you think of The Green Knight once you see it, especially given your background. So please don't forget to circle back and let us know your thoughts. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Bill, thank you again so much for joining us. And we'll put some links, of course, to the Comic Book Bears podcast in our show notes so our listeners can look you fellas up and find more good stuff. We will see you again soon. If there is a non-comic book movie that you want to review with us, we'd love to have you anytime.
Reach out.
Just let us know if you're like, man, I really want to talk about A Dog's Life 15. Whatever.
One of my favorite directors has a film coming out before the end of the year, and that may be the one. So I will reach out to you.
Ooh.
Cool. All right.
Ooh.
Can't wait.
All right,
Bill.
I love spending time with you handsome fellas, and have a great show for the remainder. Take care.
We love you, Bill.
Thank you so much, Bill. This was a blast.
Bye, Bill.
Oh my gosh, I love that guy so much. Always so great to have him on.
He's great. He's great. We love Bill. We love the entire Comic Book Bears cast and crew. It's so much fun hanging out with those boys.
Oh, totally. Always a blast.
I love the idea of having him on for a non-comic book movie. We just need to make it happen. We just need to fucking make it happen.
Well, we've done it in the past. We always say if there's a non-comic book movie, just let us know. It sounds like he's got one.
He's got one in the chamber.
He's got one in the pipeline, so it's coming our way. But of course, that invitation goes out to everybody on the Comic Book Bears podcast. We love all of you guys, and it's so great to support each other's shows by cross appearances like this. So anytime we can get you fellas on, it's a treat for us. So we appreciate you very, very much. So Jim, Will, we got 15 minutes until when our show would normally wrap up, but we still got a whole other movie to talk
on a
about.
Couple more.
I think we can stretch it a little bit.
Yeah.
But are you guys ready to talk The Green Knight?
Oh,
Indeed.
yes, I am.
All right. Awesome. So in that case, just as with the Suicide Squad, we're going to talk about The Green Knight spoiler-free for probably 10 minutes, and then we'll give you the heads up when we open things up to spoilers. So if you haven't seen The Green Knight yet and you're kind of on the fence, you're not sure if you want to see it, we'll happily give you our initial thoughts and recommendations, and then we'll give you that warning before we go into spoilers. All of that said, here we go. Our discussion of The Green Knight. All right. Will, if you would do us a favor, just give us a brief setup for this film. What did you think? Was this worth checking out? Should it be skipped? Where'd you come down?
Yeah, so The Green Knight is the new movie by A24, directed by David Lowery. This is the guy that gave us movies like A Ghost Story, Pete's Dragon, The Old Man and the Gun, Ain't Them Body Saints. All films that we've talked about generally either positively to highly positively at some context on this show. This is a fantasy sort of remix of the classic medieval story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I say it's a remix in that it takes some of the core elements of the story and it tells parts of those elements very faithfully while also sort of readapting it into its own thing. This is one of the movies I was most looking forward to this year, but it definitely seemed like an ambitious film and the type that could have a high risk, high reward. And very fortunately for me, this one fell in the high reward category. One of my absolute hands down favorite movies that I've seen this year. First of all, this is a breathtakingly beautiful movie, gorgeously shot. The camera work is all very strategic in the way when you pan or when you turn, when you move, everything here feels very artistically thought out. Everything feels like a painting. You could pause and print any single frame of this movie and hang it up on your wall. Lead performance by Dev Patel is just absolutely top notch. This is a character who is struggling with what it means to be dishonorable versus honorable as he goes through this quest and these little parts of his quest along the way. And I think that Dev Patel always tells the story, not just with, the words that he has to say, but with his face and his body and just everything that he does to react to the scenarios that are being thrown at him. We have wonderful title cards. We just have like an absolute experience of a movie. Like at the end of it, like I had to catch my breath, especially as the film kind of reaches its final climax and pulls everything to an end. It's one of those movies you just sit there for a moment and go like, okay, whew, I got through that. That's good. That's good. Yeah, it knocked me off of my feet. I loved this movie quite a bit. Probably not going to be for everyone. I think it is. There are some parts of it. This is a confrontational movie. This is a challenging movie. It's not going to be for everyone. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not for everyone, but it is very, very, very much for me.
All right. Awesome. Well, glad to hear this was such a win for you, Will. Jim, how about for you?
Yeah. This is a bit of a strange movie to talk about. For me, I think it's been like a week and a half since we did see this, and we did see it in theaters, which I'm glad we did. It's been about a week and a half, and I think I've thought about this movie a lot in the time between we saw it and now. And to me, although I have some issues with the film, and we'll talk about those. I did like it. I did appreciate it. I enjoyed it for what it was. In the moment, it felt to me like, okay, this is a David Lowery film. It's very deliberate. He knows what he wants to show. The camera does linger. There is, especially in this movie, there is very limited, very precise dialogue in this film. It's not a talky movie. It's not a very actiony movie. So what you're getting is in the visuals and kind of in the mood or tone that this movie is setting up for you, all around this Arthurian legend of Sir Gawain, I think. And I the pronunciations in the movie we'll get to, but but yeah, at the time I'm like, okay, this is a David Lowery movie. I know what to expect, and it definitely was that. I did love about the movie that you didn't know what was going to happen next. Like, I didn't know like what this movie was going to have in store for me. Like, every scene was like, okay, where is this going? There's some like legit, like almost like horror like scenes in this movie that are set up like a horror movie. A lot of tension, some adventure. Just there's a lot to this movie, and like I said, there's a lot to think about, especially after the movie. I love Dev Patel, guys. Slumdog Millionaire is a classic, but there's a movie out there called Lion. He was fantastic in. I think the guy's been an underappreciated talent, at least in the community at large. I know that certain film critics and film corners would appreciate him, but he's pretty amazing. I thought he was a really good choice here. But yeah, I did end up liking this film quite a bit, and I can't say this is a hard film to recommend, right? It's one of those films like I really appreciate it, I enjoyed it, but I can't say that, like Will, you said it, I can't say that everybody's going to enjoy this. And there are a number of reasons for that. I talked about the deliberate pace. I talked about the lack of action. Talk about the lack of dialogue. This is really kind of a journey of self-discovery of a character. And that's what you're going to get. And it's very introspective. And I appreciate it for that. I'm just going to say that I don't know if everybody would appreciate it. And that's okay. It is what it is. I don't know if I'd go back and watch it again. I might, but I'm not a rewatcher anyway, as you guys really know. But it might reward second viewings. I'll just leave it at that and say that, yes, I recommend it, but I can understand that not everybody would like it.
All right. Well, that's the second recommend. And Jim, I appreciate that you feel that way, because I'll tell you, of the three of us, I probably enjoyed this movie the least out of all of us. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's a bad movie. It's interesting. It's, visually got a lot of cool things going on, but I feel like it's very ponderous and like jerking itself off a lot. And it kind of bugs me sometimes. This movie lingers and how it almost like pretentiously tries to be like, hey, look, here's some trees and some bark and some wind. How cool is this? But I think a lot of people get off on those things. For me, like I'm used to my Arthurian legend stories being a little more actiony. I guess that's the best word for it. Jim, you used that word earlier. Usually has a little bit more going on, not as much of like a think piece. Right. I liked this film. I thought it was interesting, but this isn't something that I'd be like, oh my God, you really have to rush out and see this, unless maybe, you're a film buff, you're someone who really, really likes the artsy fartsy, ponderous for its own benefit, types of films. I think if you go into this expecting like a medieval adventure story, you're probably going to be let down a little bit. Unless, again, you're really looking specifically for those strong cinematic, stylistic things. Definitely more to talk about in spoilers. I'm not hating on this movie, just to clarify. I'm just saying, Jim, to your point, this is not for everybody. So I'm going to recommend it for those who want the artsy-fartsy stuff. But if you're expecting just a general like medieval adventure with action and cool stuff going on, I would say this is probably not the movie for you.
Yeah, and this is it's very contemplative. It's very you say ponderous, but it's really about characters. This being Sir Gawain's like story of his self-discovery, overcoming his doubts and insecurities. And really that's what it's about. And it doesn't do it through a lot of action or a lot of people telling him how great he is, or, him wooing, some damsel in distress. Although there is a little bit of that. It does it almost through, the premise of the movie is that, and this is no spoiler, that the Green Knight shows up and he basically says, whoever can, please bring forth anybody who can strike a blow against me. And somebody does, and then the game is on, right? It's called a game in the movie. That within 1 year, the Green Knight gets to return the favor and land a blow against. And so there's a lot of dread in this movie that I appreciated. Like, oh my God, what's going to happen in a year? Is he going to live? Is he going to die? Maybe you guys who are more into, you folks who are more into Arthurian legend, kind of know the whole story. And I don't even know if the way this film played out is the way that the Green Knight story plays out in written text. You know what I mean? Or in Arthurian legend or not. So I didn't know what happened. I'm not as steeped in Arthurian legend, even though I did watch Merlin. This is not Merlin. Merlin does not fucking show up in this movie. And I know that's why you're pissed, Brad. I know it.
Does he?
I don't know.
Does he not?
I was going to say, let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's
All
talk.
right, we'll talk in spoilers.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
But yeah, I mean, they do change quite a bit. I mean, especially sort of like the origin of like who and what the Green Knight actually is.
Yep.
But I think the important thing is this is a story about someone who has to wrestle with what is honor versus like what is dishonor versus how do I come out ahead in that. Because a lot of Gawain's actions and motivations are very self-interested and self-motivated. Even the original action of taking up the challenge is very self-motivated. And along the way, he finds ways to almost try to like weasel out of it, if we're going back to our weasel puns from before, or find ways of, And this film, and I think that's why everything came together so well for me. This is a movie about someone who is facing the inevitable and is trying to delay or circumvent the inevitable. When the camera lingers, it's because he's lingering. When the camera moves, it's because he's contemplating his next move. This is a movie that has a lot of, like, to your point, Brad, there's not a lot of like external action. This isn't like a swords and sorcery style medieval film, although there are swords and there is sorcery, but it doesn't kind of fall within that sword and board style genre. But there's a lot of internalized action here. This is a movie where there's kind of something constantly bubbling and constantly moving forward. And for me, that's what propels me. I love a good character study. I love a good character story. I love someone in turmoil, and someone who is in such turmoil that the movie just keeps me in a state of like suspended tension. As I figure out kind of like what they're going to do and what they aren't going to do. That's what this film did for me.
And
awesome.
I think there's a comment from Hamstrack about what Lowry does with time. And I think we should talk about that in spoilers.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think given the time we have left and where we are in the conversation, spoilers probably make sense here before we go too much further into anything. So if you guys are on board, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spoilers for The Green Knight are officially fair game. If you are listening live, there's no plugs tonight, folks. Chill, people, whoever you are. If you're waiting for plugs, we don't have them this episode, so feel free. Step away at this point, and we'll hit you next week.
If you'd like to be plugged.
If you are listening through the magic of digital tape delay, of course, feel free, just go ahead, stop the episode right here where you are. Go see The Green Knight if you want to see The Green Knight, and then come on back for spoilers. But here we go, fellas. Spoilers are good to go. Where do you want to start?
Maybe Hammy's comment?
Yeah, let's start with Hammy's comment. He says that Lowry playing with time to show what could be was a nice touch to couple with themes of honor and life choices in general. I loved what they did at the end of this movie with that because it was a solid misdirect that I did not see coming. It did not know it was being played on me. Kind of a storytelling trick, right? And other movies have done this. This is not the first time I've seen this, but did not know that this was happening until almost to the last minute, when, especially when, and Will, we talked about these interstitial like cards, whatever they like, title cards that come in and kind of go through the chapters or the different like struggles that the character is having. At one point they say, okay, he faces the Green Knight at the end. He basically chickens out, right? Doesn't fulfill his end of the bargain, and he heads home, and things we see kind of it all kind of go to shit, right? Everything's happening, his I don't know, he's his son gets killed, his newborn son grows up but gets killed in a war. The kingdom is crumbling around him. And then we find out that no, that's not really what happened. That's what would have happened had he not done the honorable thing and gone through with his obligation in this agreement, which he does. And in the end, he's rewarded for it, which I thought was pretty cool how that played out. At least that's the way I interpreted it. You may have a different interpretation of that.
I think that that's a very fair interpretation. This is the second time that we saw that time sort of foreshadowing. They did a mini version of it earlier too, when he's bound in the woods and he's sort of contemplating his next move, and it pans back to see him as just a dead skeleton there, and then it comes back and he's like, all right, I got to get moving. But what I love so much about that ending is that this is not the story, despite what the title card said of, like, I think it's like in Sir Gawain and the Headman's Axe or whatever, like that last title was. I forget the name of it, but it really had to do with like, and a beheading. That's what it says, and a beheading. This movie was not about whether or not Gawain gets beheaded in the movie. That's not what this movie is about. So you can make the argument of like, he walked away from that just fine. That was the end of it. Or he got his head chopped off right after that, but he did it with honor. The important thing for me is that doesn't matter, because this was not a film about his beheading. This was a film about his struggle with honor. And at the end, he claimed his honor kind of for the first time in this entire movie. Even the honorable things that he did earlier in the movie, he did, like he tried with the Saint Winifred at the lake. He tries to ask her for a reward first before he goes and helps her. All throughout this, he's looking for his angle, but this is the first time where he does something that is just going through with an obligation because he gave his word for it. So that's what I love so much about this. How you interpret that ending is open, but for me, the resolution happened when he made his choice.
No, right. And he makes the honorable choice. And I think the movie, though, in its storytelling kind of rewards him for that, right? The movie seems to reward him for that choice. I mean, he could have done the honorable thing and got his head chopped off, because there's kind of a line in the movie where, the Green Knight says, and now off with your head. But of course that doesn't happen, or we don't think it happens.
We have an interesting question from Bruce, who says, is it truly honorable if the choice is made as a result of knowing the bad end the dishonorable choice will lead to?
And I don't know if, in terms of the question, I don't know. Maybe not. But I don't think he knew the result. I think he
played through the result.
I think he played through in his mind what the result could be. the bad things.
So-
I don't think those things were like foretold to him by any
So-
character or any force.
In that case, did he do it because it was the right thing to do, or did he do it because he was scared of the consequences of chickening out?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
I mean, and I think that's maybe a fair kind of like way to kind of dive a little bit further into sort of the moral of this. But I think the important thing here for Gawain is he is exploring those consequences in terms of how they impact other people, the people around him, his future son, the woman that he scorns, the new wife that he takes on. He's thinking about other people in a more tangible manner than just how do I get out of this while keeping my own head. So there is some of that where he is thinking kind of actively about the consequences of others. And I would argue that, maybe that does push him more towards honorable, even within the context of that question.
Yeah, in the end, I just don't think he thought he could live with the consequences of a dishonorable, and false, presentation of his honor. Right? I don't think he could. As a knight, the knight does the honorable thing, and that's, he wanted to be the knight.
And that's a good point. Like the consequences in that, like in him kind of thinking forward, aren't the son dies. It's the weight of the dishonor and how much that it like almost like oozes out of him in all of those kind of future vision moments, and infects the people around. He doesn't live happily. He doesn't live well. And he doesn't leave something better in that. So I think that in all of those cases, it's exactly that. Like he cannot choose dishonor. Therefore he must choose honor.
Right. And, I know it's switching tracks a little bit, but we didn't mention it in non-spoilers, but I did really dig the soundtrack in this movie. I thought the soundtrack really propelled the movie and kind of filled in some of those really empty, well, not empty, but those ponderous or spaces in the movie. I thought it really set the mood, and that I really dug that. I would go back and listen to some of that soundtrack.
I did like seeing some of the other cast members. I'll just briefly mention Alicia Vikander and Joel Edgerton, for example. Were both really, really good in this for very, very short scenes, but they are they're just absolutely like talents. It's fun to see them in anything, and it's fun to see them in a spot here where they are able to pull a lot of weight without having near as much of the screen time that Dev Patel has.
Yeah, some interesting stuff happens with around the time where he meets the Joel Edgerton character. Right, there's a little bit of homoeroticism going on in those scenes. We get an
actual jerk off scene.
Yes.
Well, definitely saw. We saw the actual outcome of this master. I don't know what you'd call it, but anyway, he got a little overexcited, and then we get the surprising kiss right between Joel Edgerton and Gawain, right?
And which
kind of surprised me.
That actually is in the story's slightly different, but that part, including the kiss, is actually part of Gawain's tale. The huntsman or the lord of the manor, and kind of like the swingers parable, so to speak. It definitely ends a little differently, but that one I was surprised. I was like, was there swinging happening in the original? Oh yeah, sure enough.
That story is the sword in the hole.
Yes, yeah.
There are, I could probably count on less than one hand, like how many times you've actually seen
one hand
come in, like that's a non-porn kind of movie, right? I mean, you just don't get to see it very often.
Not often. Caveat. I do screen for an LGBT, a queer film festival, and
there's more prevalent there.
A lot of and like there's a lot of cum shots in non-porn movies that you end up getting, and a lot of those don't make it
Right.
not because of that, but like, yeah, you do see a lot, especially experimental films.
There were some weird audience reaction noises in our theater when that happened.
Yes. Yeah. Was anyone there with like their kids? Because there wasn't in mine, but I'm just wondering, was anyone there with like, my 10-year-old?
I think there was.
There were kids there, including a baby, by the way. Great film to bring a baby to. And when the cum scene happened, there was a woman a couple rows behind us who was just like, I was like,
yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? People can get their kids into R-rated movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, can they?
Yeah.
Like, I guarantee you, more kids saw Suicide Squad than The Green Knight. And we're totally fine. We're probably totally fine with that, right? But subjecting a kid to a normal, I don't know, on screen, to see that ejaculate on screen. Oh God, we can't explain what that is. God forbid we have to explain to our kids what that means. You know what I mean? But see a guy get ripped in two by a giant starfish or a shark, whatever the fuck it was, that's okay.
Well, I would just say that, like, that's the R rating comes with, regardless of whether it's for sexual content or language or violence. I think that for me, at least, it comes with the caveat of like, you as the parent are the best judge of what your child should or should not see. The ratings help, and they're basically a gatekeeper for like seeing theatrically. But more than anything, with any content on screen, if it seems like it's challenging or questioning or whatever to your child, have a conversation with them about it, whether it be about violence, whether it be about sexuality, whether it be about whatever it is. So
I'm sure those conversations are happening.
I mean. Specifically with the violence and specifically with the cum shot in this one, probably not. But I know that does happen sometimes, especially with like, with things that hit a little bit more like realism, like when there's like stuff that involves. I do know like parents will talk to kids, because I've talked to parents who do this, when the violence is more like simulate something that would be like real world violence. And, especially with everything going on right now, I know those conversations do happen. I don't know how much they happen with specifically these two movies, but still, it's, if you're not sure, it's, I'd say it's not on the filmmaker, it's on you as the parent to have those conversations and bring your kid up to speed or not bring
That's
them
a conversation for another time, and I think we could totally dive into that. I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I can't lengthen the show any more than it already is.
Well, I think that again, this is definitely a movie all of us recommended. But again, it's one of those things where it's going to be up to your own taste whether this is something that you really love or not. But how cool that we can have these great discussions.
Yeah,
absolutely. Jim. So, is there a Merlin or not?
Yeah,
right. Yeah, he was totally at the table.
He was totally. There were so they did not because they wanted this to be Gawain's story. They didn't specifically name the character, but there's a character named Magician, there's a character named King, and a character named Queen, and that's Arthur and Merlin and they mention like, oh, take this, oh, it's the sword, they don't say like it's Excalibur. They didn't want to like make it like, I don't know, it feels like that would distract too much from the story that was happening if it's that stuff happened. But the magician that was there, and when like the Green Knight bursts in and like the king looks over at the guy, at the wizard with the beard, and he just sort of like nods like, yeah, this shit's serious. That was Merlin.
Legitimate creepy stuff though at the beginning there when the Green Knight comes in. That's the part that I thought felt, I mean there were other parts too, but I thought that felt legitimately like a horror movie, like, because that he didn't look like a person, right? He looked just totally like a being, like a creature. And it was menacing, right? He came in tall on that horse, and he's like, any of you fuckers want to take a swing at me, come on out. And I got the sense that the kingdom was not in the greatest shape when that happened. You know what I mean? It was kind of, it felt a little like the king. Well, the king himself, I think, was a little bit toward the end of his reign, anyway. So
He's getting on in years. Remember, he's getting older.
you remember, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, listen, I wanted to do this earlier, but I was having some technical difficulties, which I think I've resolved. I don't know if Tony is still here, but Tony shared this with us. Can you guys see this image?
Oh, I sure can. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we were talking about popcorn, and Tony had to go make some popcorn to enjoy while he watched the podcast. I couldn't get it to work earlier, so Tony, if you're still here, I had asked him if I could share this, and he said yes. So, Tony, thanks for sending this in. We got a cute little puppo in the picture,
Oh, I
too.
know.
Oh,
I'm totally starving right now.
That's such a great. Thank you for joining us. I mean, everyone, but Tony, and sharing the photo with us, having some popcorn. Like it's nice to be a part of your movie experience, even if it's just us gabbing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely agree. And now I really want popcorn too. So we got to make that happen somehow. Well, listen, great conversation on the Green Knight. Jim, Will, always a delight. Green Knight, delight to hear you fellas kind of expand on your thoughts. And even though we all come at this, from different places, some really, really great conversational topics here. So very, very cool. We, I think, are going to go ahead and adjourn for the week, and then we'll be coming back next time. But before we do that, Jim, Will, let's let people know where they can chat movies with us in the interim. Jim, let's start with you.
Sure. You can find me where I like to talk about movies and other stuff, music, movies, TV shows, whatever, on Twitter. And my handle is at JJP Out West, all one word. My initials JJP and then the words Out West, or on Facebook under Jim Pugliafco, my name.
All right. Excellent. Will, how about you?
Look for me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook, William Lindis. And you can find me on Letterboxd, where I rate and review everything I watch. Just search for William Lindis. Give me a follow. I'll follow you back.
All right. Excellent. You can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at iBradPro, or on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one who likely has Chub Chaser Bear friends in common with you. Folks, this has been a great episode. Thanks so much for joining us. We had a ton of people on with us tonight. We didn't get to read every comment on air, but we were following along, and some fun conversations were happening. So thanks for being part of that. By the way, we did get a bathtub picture from Magic Mike. Jim, Will, I don't know if you guys saw that while we were podcasting, but pretty fucking hot. And then Bill sent one back. So, it's really nice. But now we're on the hook to send pictures back to them. So we gotta take something.
Make that happen.
I think we can do that. So anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.